This is Chris Schick from ITN. We're very lucky to have Chris today. It's a very good time to get Chris because we've got so much political, so many political stories in our bulletin, and so much of the bulletin is obviously to do with Eastleigh. It's a story that Chris will be covering for ITN. No doubt, in the next 2 weeks.
Well, no, tomorrow actually.
This is you will be there with David Cameron tomorrow.
Piece of research.
Exactly.
Actually.
Can we borrow your pictures?
if I can borrow your research, that's absolutely fine.
For next week. So.
Hello and welcome to Winchester News Online. I'm Luke Garrett. As the Eastleigh by-election kicks off, tough questions begin to follow some of the parties in the race. Nick Clegg and Nigel Farage have been in Eastleigh representing their respective parties. Our political correspondent Nadine Forshaw was there as the campaign got underway.
Where are we going? Straightforward, right. Follow Katie. Right.
You can excuse the deputy.
Well done. I thought that was excellent. Really, really good. I thought there was a good lot of detail on that top story, and you know how important it is. It's a big national by-election. You know, it could be one of the most important of this Parliament. So I thought you covered it comprehensively. You've had some big figures in town. You've got interviews with Nigel Farage, with Nick Clegg, with the UKIP candidate. So, you know, talking in general terms, I thought it was excellent coverage. You had the picture, you had the candidates, you had the fight, you had the detail, you had the history. So I think you've worked very hard on all of that and done very well. Let's go from the very top. Headlines I thought were good. One thing I've noticed that you've changed since I was last here is that you were pre-recording it, which is a fantastic idea. I don't know when you started doing that, but obviously you know how things can go wrong, and if the top of the show goes wrong, everything else that follows is likely to be a little bit slippy. So I thought that was good. They were nice and clean. I think you redid them again at the top, which is, where's Mrs. Director? There, you'd read them again at the top, which is a thing you can do, which is excellent. And I think those little touches really help to give it a professional feel, getting the music and everything working very well. Certainly, who wrote the headlines? Because I thought they were very good. Over there, Sam, well done. Particularly like Brothers Brawl with Bouncer. There you go. I can't read my own writing. I thought that, you know, some really nice alliteration there. So, so well done. Just before you went online, before you went to air at 3 o'clock, one of the things you did do was go through your scripts, and that's really important. I think you were having your first run through at about 22, and given that you were also this week's editor, I think you had a lot on your plate. I would have thought by about 1:30, you should have just delegated to somebody else and said, look, I've got things. Because if you started messing up all your scripts or not knowing what was in the programme because you were out here sorting out other stuff, then all that hard work would have been to waste. So I would have probably just, if you had a deputy or someone that you could have just said, can you sort this out? I've got stuff to get on with. But I don't think you don't ordinarily have editor and presenter roles at the same time. So, you know, well done, good work. But I would have just kicked away all that stuff a lot earlier and been in the studio looking through your scripts and knowing what you had to do. But all in all, excellent. One of the things I might suggest, I think we spoke about earlier when we were going through your piece, is actually now this Eastleigh campaign is going to be coming back and back and back and back. Just send someone to go to the top of a car park or go up to a sort of high point if Eastleigh has one and just take some sort of shots of the top of the town, because that gets you out of all manner of holes in whatever package you're doing over the next 2 or 3 weeks. Just to get a wide of Eastleigh with pan left, a pan right, and a few close-ups from that one vantage point. It won't take you long, and I think that can just go into your pot of Eastleigh GVs, which would be quite useful to have. From memory, it's quite a flat place, Eastleigh, isn't it? I don't think there's many hills, but they have multi-storey car parks, so there's the place to go and try and get a vista of the town, which is quite nice. It's nice to get sort of a bit out of town centre if you can, but that's just a small suggestion. Right, VTs, where are we? Nadine first. Brilliant. Really, really good, actually. I thought particularly the way you started with that, sort of Clegg not knowing which way he was going, and then you wrote to that as well. Brilliant. I thought that was very well done. It's always good. You know, often what lifts a VT is the natural sound, not the delivered soundbite. And we had three of us had a discussion about letting Clegg waffle on for hours about his party's manifesto and how great they are. But it's those little grabs that can sometimes really lift a piece. So well done for spotting that and having it at the top. One of the things I might have mentioned and was mentioned on Monday when Clegg was there was that it was being done in a car workshop, I think, wasn't it, from memory? And the irony of launching your campaign in a car workshop when your MP has just resigned because he was speeding in a car. Some sort of reference to that might have been quite nice. And actually there was lots of shots of Clegg around. Could have done with a little more, I could have done with seeing where he was a bit more, maybe. And actually I have this problem all the time. When you get the feeds, we often pull all this stuff, so either the BBC or us or Sky will pull it. You just end up with lots of shots of the leader, and actually what you want sometimes is some picture that's not of them, which is of the car mechanics or the car, or wide of the whole workshop or something. So just bear that in mind, that just, you can have too many shots of Nick Clegg walking around. So once you feel like you've got enough, go away and take some alternative shots, which will add to the package. But you mentioned Chris Huhne, and I thought that worked quite, pretty well when he went from Clegg's manifesto. You mentioned Huhne, then he had a second clip in Huhne. That was all very good. You teed up Diane James very nicely, UKIP's candidate. I think we had a chat about that, and the way you then introduced her was very good. And then, the lovely man of Nigel Farage. I thought it captured nicely his visit, and I particularly liked your line about raining on his parade. Before you had that in isolation, I think then we talk about it and you put that into a sentence, and it didn't feel as much of a pun. It felt like it lended itself to the story as opposed to just getting the pun in for the sake of it. So I thought there you did very well. Lewis was next. Really good. I'll take down all those notes and use them tomorrow, a bit later. One thing on the camera work, the tracking took too long to get to you. I wanted to see you a lot sooner. It sort of took ages and ages and ages, and finally we saw you, and just as you appeared in vision, you were off to a graphic. So a nice device, nice idea and all the rest of it, but to actually just get to yourself a bit more quickly, because it was an empty room, I think. Was it this room, in that seat even? It was not as if there was tons to see, but use the device, use that tracking shot, mix that sort of stuff up, but actually get to you a bit more quickly and then get off to the graphic. And a similar point that we had a chat with sorry, I've forgotten your name, the other graphic piece. Jack's piece. We had a chat with that. With yours, I could have done with being drawn into some of the detail in that graphic. And we had this discussion, and we wrote his piece, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But actually, there's a lot of information on there, 49%, this percent, that percent. Just take the viewer, say what you see. If you remember Roy Walker's catchphrase from days of old, just tell the viewer what they're looking at. Rather than talk generically, just point this and that. You don't have to do all the information on the screen, but at least highlight some of the main bits and take them through it. But certainly, I learnt a lot. I'm trying to read my writing here, and I think you said former disgraced MP, as opposed to disgraced former MP. You can be a formerly disgraced MP if he exonerates himself, but I think at the moment he's still disgraced, as opposed to formerly disgraced. But yes, very good. Where are we now? Package 3 was it the roundup of all the
Poll.
Yes, no, I know, I liked it. We worked on that. I think we worked on the lead in, didn't we? Of actually saying we have reporters with all the camp, and then we added, but we begin with, and then you're introducing the top one. So you've told the viewer we're going to have 4 reports now, and we start with, which was a very nice way of doing it. And I thought that little sequence worked very well. Simisola. Well, sorry, tell me how you pronounce your name. Simisola. Very nice piece. I would have just done something you're framing, because your head was right in front of that sign. So you either need to be this side of it or that side of it, but not right in the middle. So, I mean, it's not much of a sign. I think it's something house. Presumably that's where the Tory campaign's being run from. But, just when you're framing it up, are you doing these things yourselves? I take it as well. So just have I don't know how you do it. I'm sure you're much better than I am, but just record a bit, go back and have a look at it, and whenever you have a sign, it's always best to have it on one side or the other, rather than, because I then couldn't read it. But other than that, I thought it was a really good piece and a really good roundup. Labour, who did Labour's piece? Not here. Just a very small point, dancing on the head of the pin once more. 9.6%. Viewer doesn't really count. I'd probably be inclined to say less than 10. It's just more memorable. They polled less than 10% rather than 9.6. And I think the VT on the UKIP one cut off a bit early, didn't it? Didn't we have a technical issue there, which I'm sure you'll resolve? But I didn't see much of the UKIP one, so I couldn't. I can't comment on too much. Except it was probably in the nicest location, actually, because it had I think a shop front and lots of flags and things behind you. So always just think about where you're doing it. It doesn't have to be from the headquarters if it doesn't look very nice. For example, we always used to do lives and pieces of cameras from outside Tory headquarters, CCHQ, when it was in a place called Smith Square. You might remember Margaret Thatcher leaning out the window with the 3 election victories in her hand. They're not there anymore. They're in some faceless tower block, and actually we just don't ever go there because it doesn't look right. We'd rather have Big Ben behind us and just not. So we actually choose now not to go there. Similarly, the Lib Dems have moved from a famous building called Cowley Street, and they're now in a faceless office somewhere as well. So just have a little think. I thought the UKIP one of them all was the nicest backdrop. It was the shop. It had lots of the purple and yellow, and for me, it felt like I was being taken right to their HQ. So you don't, I would. It's up to you. You're making a point of doing it from all the campaign HQs. Fair enough. But I think as you go on the next few weeks, just pick the nicest location rather than the headquarters. Right, we spoke about your piece, didn't we? Because when I first watched it, I was being a bit confused. You were talking about 1994, I was seeing graphics of 2005, graphics were revealing, you weren't taking me through them. And actually what we got in the end was very good. I think you put some picture at the top because it didn't lend itself to the graphic. And then as you went through, you were explaining what I was seeing as it was appearing. And I thought it was a vast, vast improvement on what we had before. And it really, really made a lot of sense. So I thought that reworking that I'm sorry made you do at the last minute was very good, and it really, I thought, added to the piece. I think the student poll was a good idea as well. Clearly, most of them won't live in Eastleigh, but hey, let's find out what students think. And it's actually quite interesting to see, not surprisingly, not a great deal of support for the Liberal Democrats and the coalition among students. So I thought that was just quite interesting in itself. Even it doesn't quite lend itself to the story, but it does lend itself to your viewers. So I thought that was, all in all, a very nice idea. The crime VT, there we are. Hello, Christina. Very good. I think the piece that I saw, I couldn't work out was the piece that we reworked or not, but how far did you get with it? Because I think we did start off in full frame. We had that conversation because you've got that very good treatment where you're actually highlighting somebody in a big CCTV. But that was your opening shot, and we had a chat, didn't we, about sort of actually you just want to see a big full frame picture at the top and then close down on who you're talking to and what you're actually seeing. Just like any story really, start wide. It was in this club where he did that, rather than start with a, whatever it was, 90% of the screen is black with a little hole in it. So I thought that was, was good. It was a really nice piece. For once, you had a crime story with picture and a court story with picture, and I think, a lot of the times that can decide the difference between doing a story and not doing a story. It's just whether the picture's there. It's not about the strength of the story itself. It's about how you do it. And we spoke about Winchester Crown Court and how you get cameras and what's in the court precinct, what's outside the court precinct, how you film people. But I think court stories, crime stories are always difficult pictorially, and I thought that one was excellent. You guided us through what happened. He did this, he did that, Bouncer did that. It was well told, and you come away knowing exactly what happened. And it is the point where we get reminded of all the time. We see the story 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times in the edit suite. The viewer only sees it once, so it's got to be clear. It's got to be simple. And I thought that was so. Well done with that. I thought the Pope thing was a really good idea. It was quite good to take what was an international story on Monday, which presumably was quite a fast turnaround. Did you do it yesterday, or where is our reporter? Yesterday or yesterday? So I mean, a really good fast turnaround on that one. It's always good to take a national story and see what the local Catholic Church thinks of it. We spoke earlier, I think, about the horse meat. I mean, that's a big issue at the moment. It's only affected, I think, as of last night, an abattoir in Yorkshire. But you never know if you could ever get something in it, get some views of a butcher or an abattoir here. Maybe they won't let you in to film cows being slaughtered, but I like the idea of taking a national story and making it local, and I thought they're very good. I particularly like your voxes, actually, and I'll tell you what, you had a vox in there where the woman at the end just sort of sighed or just went, she was affected by the Pope, and, as you would be if you were that committed a Catholic. And I like that. I mean, she didn't say anything. She didn't use words, did she? She just went, but it's just nice. It gave you a sense of how she was feeling, and I was nice to have kept that in. I don't know whether that was a conscious decision, but I thought that worked really well. The coming up was good. Eggman. Yeah, Eggman. I thought the coming up was very good, well written. It worked very well. It broke up the flow of the show. It was really good to have it in. But we did discuss, actually, whilst all the script was there, you sat on a bale of hay. My eye was expecting a story about a farm. My ear was telling me it's going to be about an egg. So I probably would have done that coming up next to the pod, or just something that gave you a different idea. But the coming up, the thought, the script, and everything was excellent. So well done. Technical issue with sports. I like the guy's tie. I couldn't see his face. So did you watch? Have you watched it go out? So it's some aspect, right? Again, aspect ratio. I could see from here to here. So I think obviously you were saying something about cameras, weren't you? But
I think it might have been saved in the wrong sort of.
Right. Was the VT checked before?
It was checked, but we can use the pre-recorded version that's in the right aspect ratio.
Right. So when you checked it pre-transmission, did it look like it was in the right aspect ratio?
It did before.
Right.
Sport came in really late, so yeah.
Right. Well, I'm sure you get told this week in, week out. The earlier you get these things out, then they can check that. And because actually, I think there was quite a bit of time in the gallery, really. You practiced the script and everything before. You could have gone through some of the VTs, checked they were clean. Quite often, a director will just top and tail a VT just to check the top, check the bottom, and check that it is clean. If you haven't got time to do that, clearly you've got to prioritise what's important. But yeah, it was quite interesting seeing your tie in your mouth, and I think the guy from, was it Eastleigh FC, was was all that half of his face. But I mean, that's something that you can rectify in post production. As apart from those technical issues, I thought it was really nicely scripted. Actually, sport is. There's the expert. Ask him why you're asking me. But I mean, it's very easy just to see a lot of action. But I thought you guided us through it, and everything worked, and the pauses were there. So I thought that was all good, particularly the just pausing, and I think that goes across the board. And some conversations that we had in our one-to-one discussions earlier, let things breathe. It's absolutely fine. You don't have to be talking for the entirety. If the picture's good enough or the sound's good enough, just let the viewer have a break from you ranting on, if I may say. And then Matt, a really good egg story. I thought that all the puns were there, pretty much every single one. Which is very good. And it's an and finally, so I think you can get away with it. I think if it was a slightly tighter, a slightly more serious story, yes, you'd still get a pun or two in, because that's nice. The alliteration is what sometimes lifts a piece. But you got away with it because it was an and finally, and I thought that was very good. And I particularly liked the way you interviewed the guy who was talking, but also describing what was on the graph. It's much more interesting than a man standing here like this. It just really flowed very nicely. It felt like it flowed nicely. So really good. And you worked, you did 2 or 3 takes on the goodbye at the end. Yes, which is hassle, but it is those small things that make a huge difference, isn't it? Because that just makes it seem more professional, and you were practicing the music, and you were right to do so. So I thought that was excellent. So all in all, content good. The pictures were good. So if it's fair for me to say, compared to the one I saw 2 years ago, that was 60% better than the one I saw 2 years ago, so well done. Obviously, you got excellent teaching from my left and right here, and where's Chris right there. So I thought it was really, really good programme, and great that you've got a national story on your doorstep, isn't it? So really good news. So I might see some of you with the Prime Minister down there tomorrow. So anyway, give yourselves a round of applause. I thought it was excellent. Well done.
Great to have you down.
Me? Probably not the answer you're expecting, because a colleague was on maternity leave and they needed someone to fill a hole. I did the hole filling, and then somebody else left and I stayed, and there we go. Yeah. I could say it was a desire of mine for all my life to do politics. But actually it wasn't. But actually now I'm there, I actually quite like it, rather than do the general news. It's actually quite nice to have a specialism, and in a way which I think the BBC did before us, but we're now doing, having your specialist editors. We've got Laura Bloomsberg, who does business for us. Tom Bradley's our political editor. There's a guy called Steve Scott who does sports editor, and I just they like that input, that specialism, and it's the way it's going. They No, I mean, I think what I was impressed with last time I came here was that, how you've got a deadline, you go at 3, that's fantastic practice, because it exists in the real world. We've got a bulletin at 1:30, 6:30 and 10 every day. You just have to have it there in the gate. Every so often a boss will come round because of some disaster in the programme and insist that everything's in half an hour before time, and then everything slips back to coming in at 6:29. But you can't be there at 6:31 when you're expected to be on at 6:30. And that discipline that you've all got here of going at 3, no matter what state it's in, no matter, nothing's ever perfect. And I think that's great work. And you're doing all the filming yourself as well, which I think is a huge skill. Being a VJ from a long time ago, when all I was doing is feeding picture into important correspondence, I mean, I only was doing one side of it, so I know how hard the filming is. But you're actually doing the filming, and you're doing the reporting, and the phone calls, and the scripting, and the research. It's a huge, huge job, and will stand you in good stead. I know certainly all of our ITV regions now increasingly rely on video journalists. I think the BBC go that way, maybe not to such a great extent, but it's a skill that you will need and you will use. And actually, being a team game as this is, it's quite useful to have that technical knowledge as well, to have that background knowledge in how things are put together, why you cut from a wide to a close-up, or why you need a bit of picture to join up two bits of SOT. So, and I thought you're doing an excellent job, so keep up the good work.
How are things different here to how they were when you started?
Technology and online are the two big things. I'm such a dinosaur, as I remember when you did radio with a little bit of tape and a ewer and a razor blade and a bit of tape. It's remarkable, really. And now online is big, and just how you're able to put these pieces together with that fantastic kit you've got here. I think you're very lucky to have that such good programs. Even we struggle sometimes with edit gear. So I think the technology's there, and you're putting it all out online, and that's increasingly where people are getting their news from. I was having a conversation with someone the other day how plenty of people much younger than I don't have a landline, they don't even have a TV because they just watch programs on demand on their iPad or whatever. So things are changing, and I think the way in which you're doing it here, putting your stories online and doing the whole job end to end is really good, and it'll stand you in good stead for when you get your first jobs. So well done, guys. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.